We have made it to the very end of the Alaska Reading Playbook and at Comprehension. Comprehension is the end of the playbook because it is the goal of reading, right? This is the goal of everything that we do with literacy, is so that they can comprehend, like that quote from chapter 4 where about 4th grade we start reading to learn instead of learning to read. So it's that concept of comprehension, understanding what was read, to actually read something, know what was read, understand it, and have learned from that process. So comprehension is like this combination of being able to decode plus understanding language comprehension, which includes what our background knowledge, sentence structure knowledge, vocabulary, and then putting them together to understand what was read, right? So the brain uses the same area of the brain for listening comprehension as reading comprehension. A really important quote there, because that tells us that students, when they hear it, if they can comprehend it by hearing it, they can comprehend it by reading it. It's just a slightly different process, right? But it's the same part of the brain. There's sort of 3 active steps in comprehension. We first have the cognitive process of reading, taking in the information, whether that be something you listen to or that you're reading. The second step is to actively process what was just read. Thinking about it, making sure that we understand what we read or we heard, we're comprehending, right? And then the third is to apply this. So we see this with listening comprehension when we're giving directions to our secondary students. We tell them something, they hear it, then they think about, like, okay, I'm doing this step, then this step, then this step. These are the steps Miss Dawn just told me to do. And then third, they apply. They actually do those steps, right? So same process, same part of the brain. Comprehension is taught in every single subject all of the time. And this is actually maybe where we struggle a little bit as secondary teachers, is that we tend to assume that our secondary students are already at the comprehension stage of their literacy journey. And so this is actually the one that we are all, as secondary teachers, most comfortable with, we're most familiar with, and we sort of know how to teach. So when we go through this process here of talking about comprehension, I want to think about what we maybe are missing with comprehension, because it is something that we sort of already do in most classes every day, right? Because it's this idea of to intentionally think about what we just learned, to be able to answer questions about it, to be able to think about it, to process it, to tell other people about it, okay? All right, so in that process, let's look at our umbrella of literacy with the Scarborough Rope, Bloom's Taxonomy, and Adolescent Brain, while we're looking at this final stage of reading, which is comprehension. I say final stage because it's the final stage of the book, but we are going to go beyond the playbook and talk a little bit past comprehension in the next lesson. So in reading, the Scarborough Reading Rope, comprehension is really this goal, right? So this is the goal of everything. All of these language comprehension skills, word recognition skills, all of this together, those times two together, just like we saw in the playbook, those two together creates this skilled reading. And so we have all of these strands together now. This is the end, right? Having weaker strands of any other strand doesn't mean that there is no comprehension, but it might mean that there's less comprehension. So this is one of those areas where, as secondary teachers, we need to be mindful that we might be able to get comprehension out of students, and we will be able to get some comprehension, even if they are very much missing their decoding strand, or it's very, very weak, right? We will still get comprehension from them. But it might mean less comprehension, not as great comprehension. There's going to be missing pieces, okay? So as adolescent learners, they are at that point, even at that, if they're still really struggling with their phonics and word recognition, they still cognitively are at the point that they can start comprehending what they're reading and be able to apply that knowledge. But there's going to definitely be less comprehension when we're missing some of those past skills, right? And all learners, all of our secondary learners, no matter what skill level that they have, can always continuously strengthen these ropes. So comprehension, there are ways to teach it and check for it and make it stronger, but really when we're doing comprehension, we're really looking at everything together. There isn't a comprehension strand in the Scarsborough rope because it is all of the things, right? So comprehension can't be separated from everything else we've already talked about in secondary literacy. And when we look at Bloom's taxonomy, I want us to keep in mind, and I've said this before, that individuals in the secondary level already have started to develop these secondary higher thinking skills. Their brains are starting to develop more. They can evaluate, they can analyze. However, they might struggle with understanding when they're missing some of those decoding skills. So, like I said with Scarsborough rope, there's still going to be the potential of comprehension. It's just going to be less when there's missing these other ideas. Because this really isn't so much a pyramid, it's more like a tornado, right? It's like this spiral effect where they spiral up and down. So if they get up to understand when they're trying to read something and they don't comprehend what they read, right? These students that have these other skills are going to sort of spiral up here and start making some guesses about it. They might judge or criticize the text because they don't comprehend it. They might try to create something and they might try to apply it to what they know. It's sort of this spiral, so that they can get some sort of comprehension out of it. And so they're going to be using these skills that they have in Bloom's taxonomy of thinking to help them when we're missing some other information here. Okay, so keep in mind that comprehension is sort of this base understanding here to be able to analyze that information, but that doesn't mean that they can't analyze around the information to try to guess that understanding. Okay, so there is sort of this base level here that they won't actually comprehend. They won't really be able to analyze a text, for example, a theme of a text. They're not really going to be able to analyze theme of a text if they don't have a good comprehension of that text, right? However, they might use their analytical skills to guess comprehension and then try to analyze. So when we have a skill we're trying to get them to do, like establishing theme of a text, and they're struggling with comprehension because they're struggling with some of their decoding skills, or they're not incredibly familiar with language syntax and things like that, they're going to have a harder time. It's going to take them longer because they're going to have to try to use these skills to guess, accommodate for themselves, and then try to do it what's being asked of them, right? So some considerations for the adolescent brain. First of all, and I said this earlier, that I personally have made the mistake of assuming that because we're in the secondary level, we're at comprehension, that we don't really need to teach reading so much and literacy skills because they're ready to comprehend. They're ready to understand and apply information, right? And they can, but as I said before, that's because they're using their more developed brains to make guesses about what they're comprehending. So there might be missing links in what they're comprehending. So we can't just assume that students will comprehend what we're giving them, even if it's at like grade level reading. We can't just assume they're going to get it. We can't send them home with a science textbook and a worksheet and just assume that they're going to be able to comprehend what they're reading and put it down. They might be able to copy. That doesn't mean they understand, right? Because we have adolescents here, they can comprehend things that they're incredibly interested in. They will make the effort, right? And I have some really stupid examples there, but these are the slang that some of our youths are using right now. Sheesh. And sus standing for that's suspicious, and sheesh is like, oh my gosh. And so these are things that they hear and they comprehend, and they might seem foreign to us. And if you've never heard it before, it definitely felt foreign to me when I first started. I was like, what the heck are you saying, sus? What does that mean, right? But when they have these things that they're interested in, as if it's connected to social media and their TikToks and getting likes, and being connected with this like adolescent speak that they have, it makes them feel special. It makes them feel connected in their identity seeking goal. So they're going to comprehend it. So anytime that we can use what they're interested in to our benefit, it's positive, even if it's so cringy, right? Even if you're like being the cringiest teacher in the world trying to use their slang, when you're trying to get them to comprehend a new skill, they'll automatically start buying in because it's what they're interested in. Okay, so when it comes to comprehension in the adolescent brain, it's more important to understand that the other factors in their lives are going to affect how much they comprehend. Because you can have a student that's one day just killing it and totally understands what they read and can explain it to you, and then the next day, no idea what they just read, right? We know this as an adult. If I try to read my textbook while I'm very sleepy, I'm not going to comprehend everything. So we have adolescents that their circadian rhythm's a little bit messed up. They're sleeping later. They might be tired. First thing in the morning, not going to comprehend that well. At the end of the day, when their brains are a little bit tired, not going to comprehend super well. Things like who's in their classes with them, what sort of social interaction identity are they having in that class will affect their comprehension. The time of day, what classes they had before, all of those things affect comprehension. So there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. And so when we get into past the playbook, we will need to discuss like some of those non-learning things that adolescents might need help with, just some life skills, right? One thing with adolescents is that they don't really particularly like being told that they're wrong when they're trying to guess what it means in a text, right? They'll check out, they'll want to fight back on that. There's that sort of rebellious, we need to be right, I need to figure this out on my own. So give them options for comprehension. Like, it doesn't have to mean one exact thing. If they can support it, they can talk about it. If they do share an idea that is extremely wrong about what they think something means, try to praise what could be right about it before giving them other considerations to not lead to any of that embarrassment. Okay, so suggested activities across curriculum. These are a lot of things that we are kind of naturally good at doing in the secondary level. So really with all of these, I want you to keep in mind the adolescent brain element, and also how do we embed some of those other skills that they might need help on, vocabulary, those phonics skills that they might be struggling with. How do we remove any sense of embarrassment from these activities? How do we bring in the things that adolescents are passionate about, care about? How do we bring in their peers to help move them along and help them want to comprehend? So think alouds, have them talk about what things mean to them. Think, pair, share. I hate that phrase, but it works, like talking to each other, right? Any sort of cooperative learning where they work together to figure out what a textbook means, an article means, a story means. Using graphic organizers where they like pull out details from the text and like, oh, this happened for second, third, that type of stuff. Obviously answering comprehension questions, what happened here. Close reading, looking at it with a pen, circling things, looking up words they don't know, getting that vocabulary involved as well. Having them come up with their own questions. That's a huge check for comprehension. If they can ask relevant, good quality questions, they are comprehending the text, right? The structure of informational text in science and social studies, we have different types of structures of informational text. Have them identify them, have them outline them, right? Summarization is a huge skill. Who, what, where, when, why happened in a text very much shows comprehension. And then those three sort of stages of comprehension: pre-assess, give them some general information about a text, have them read it, have them reread it, and then have them reflect. That metacognition, think about what they read. All of these apply in all content areas and should be done in all content areas where we should be teaching comprehension.